Hey everyone, today I got something very exciting, both from a technical point of view and from a developmental point of view. So today we'll be looking through these demos and betas and going through any of the content that we really realistically can within a certain time allotment. Because as much as it would be cool to show every single disc off for an hour, that's unfortunately not very realistic for the length of this video. There is so much that I was starting to compile that I realized the last section would just make more sense to have as a separate video later, because it wasn't quite along the same lines of what we're looking at today. So I'll explain it at the end of the video, but I want to kind of structure these videos in a way where it's exciting to see what's coming next without knowing everything up front. So I'm not going to be super forthcoming. I'm going to go one disc at a time, and I'm going to go in the order that I was checking them out, and there's a reason for this. Because I think the journey going through these different discs is maybe more exciting than doing it in a chronological order for how I was experiencing it. So for the first couple of things, we're going to be using the PS3's backwards compatibility to get footage through a pure digital HDMI out signal, running through my upscaler, then running to my pretty garbage capture card, but it's doing the job plenty enough for what we're going to be seeing today. So there are some things that aren't going to be completely accurate as far as how this might have been performing on original hardware, because I am, running it through emulation technically through the PS3, and then it's going to be de-interlacing an image. Most of these didn't have progressive support, so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here. I'm going to be smoothing out the image a little bit, so it does cause some performance drops, but I'm trying to get the cleanest image possible for this video, so it's not always relevant to the actual performance that these games have. And Gran Turismo is something I've only really started getting into in my later years, so I don't have all the knowledge of all the games and every car and track and stuff. So there are some things that if I'm not confident on a certain thing, I'm not gonna say anything about it. There might be a track in one of these that I may not understand the significance of, but I've done as much research as I can to make sure this video is still good and entertaining, even if I don't know all the tidbits and stuff about the Gran Turismo series. So with that, the first thing we're looking at today is Gran Turismo 2000. At least that's what it's known on the title screen and what I'm reading on wiki articles and stuff like that. So this to me is incredibly fascinating. From my understanding, this is essentially... Now, it's not this basic and it's not this simple, but essentially an updated Gran Turismo 2, which was originally on the PlayStation 1, but updated that to try to utilize the PlayStation 2 hardware and just kind of show off what they might be able to do with the new system coming out. What makes this so fascinating is, from my understanding, it seems like most of this technical makeup and everything about this was pretty much just scrapped, and Gran Turismo 3 exists instead, which is an entirely different technical beast as far as how just about everything works. To me, this is incredibly fascinating, because it's a look at what about if we were developing PS2 games with all the technical techniques that we would have been using on the PlayStation 1 and going around those limitations and stuff. Because obviously, as the console comes out and as the generation got along, all of the different types of development and new engines companies were making, it all started gearing towards a different style of technical makeup. And I know I'm not trying to use vague words here. I just feel like the way, again, from a very technical perspective, the way companies and development teams were developing games and working around certain limitations of the PS1 or N64, it is an entirely different sort of concept and way of working through things than what eventually was the standard once we got to the PS2. And I feel like even that changed once again once you got to the PS3 and 360 generation and everything. So it's a really cool look at what a PS1 game would look like if it was made for the PS2, if that kind of makes sense. I know I'm overgeneralizing here, and I'm not trying to use the word technical over and over again, but that's literally the best way I can think to describe it. It's a really fascinating look at very early PS2 developments as far as, because this came out, or rather was shown off, in 1999, so before the PS2 even, technically came out. Obviously, they had development kits and stuff like that. So this was, an early look at pre-launch PS2 software, which is super cool and super interesting. To me, it reminds me a lot of, the Dreamcast, but definitely, better. But if we're looking at stuff, specifically what this was really starting to remind me of was, either Sega GT or maybe, Tokyo Extreme Racer 2 a little bit. It's just kind of when things started getting like way more advanced on the Dreamcast, but there's still like a certain ceiling they hit. It's almost reminding me of a little more of like a souped up Dreamcast game, and it's such an interesting visual style, because like there's still stuff like when you look in like the background and stuff, it's very barren and very bland. Like I'm not saying it's like boring to look at, but it's more of like, again, stuff you would see on the PS1, where like the focus is going to be directly what you're seeing, and then putting some stuff in the background, that way you have an actual idea of what the background's supposed to be. But you're not going to have, and again, in the sense of a racing game, you're not going to have these lavish backgrounds and stuff that where you have all the free resources to just do whatever with. Like, you're gonna have to be more sparing and more limiting about what you're doing, and it reminds me of that kind of development style, and it's super cool. So to get into more of the actual gameplay of it, you have, and get ready for this, drum roll, everything, you have one car. Oh yeah. Now, I'm not a car guy, so if I don't understand how cool some of these cars are and stuff, like, forgive me. Like, I like technical stuff and talking about hardware and software and all that stuff. Not that I don't think some cars look cool and stuff, so, but you have one car, you have a couple different colors you can choose from. You can choose either a normal or drift style. I tried the drift style out for a while. I was doing horrible with that. I have some pretty bad footage in some of these, and to me, it's like more entertaining to keep that in instead of having this like perfect driving game, because I'm not like great at racing games. And again, when I was trying the drift out, oh boy, it was really bad. So you got one car, a couple colors, you got like different styles you can choose from. You can choose like automatic, manual and stuff like that. And then you have one track and a 2-minute time limit. Now the thing that's interesting is there are other cars in this demo, if you want to call it that, beta, whatever, where you can't actually drive them, but they are already existing in this game, so you can kind of look at them in the footage and stuff, but you yourself can only drive one car. So I got footage, I did a couple laps, and then one of them with like the drift style, one of the laps I drove backwards just to make sure I saw all of the stage. So like I kind of pieced together everything I really could of this game, but at the end of the day, it's more of just, this is very technically interesting, but you're going to play this for at most 10 minutes, and you'll see everything that you need to see in the game. Now, what I do wish is I was reading that you could like break out of the boundaries of the stage, and so I wanted to show more off of maybe stuff we weren't supposed to really see. But the video I was trying to look at for guidance was like privated, so I couldn't really do anything with that. But apparently it's possible. But for now, we just have normal footage of this game, which is still very interesting, especially if you're a fan of this kind of stuff. I would say even if you're like not into Gran Turismo, I still think this is interesting as a early development of a PS2 game. And again, I feel like from a technical perspective, this is so interesting, and it's so cool to look at kind of what their ideas were in the very beginning, especially considering how different Gran Turismo 3 ended up looking and feeling, where that feels like, okay, that's a PS2 game, while this feels like I said, like an updated PS1 game. So, moving on with the second thing that I looked at for this video. It is what I believe the best thing I could call this is, it's part of the Gran Turismo concept series, which was mostly based on the Gran Turismo 3 engine, if I'm understanding correctly, and it was like for concept cars or upcoming cars or like specialty cars, and it's like they made those cars to drive in like the Gran Turismo 3 engine, and you got to try out the car or whatever. So I sound so disrespectful towards people that are really into cars, and I don't mean to, because the stuff it is cool. Like I said, I'm just like, I'm not a car guy, so I don't know everything about this stuff. So the first one I was looking at today, because I couldn't get the first one being 2001 Tokyo. I couldn't get that to work, unfortunately, but from what I'm reading, I'm not missing out on too much compared to the other ones I looked at today, so you're still getting something really cool to learn about and look at and experience today. So the first one that I'm actually going to be looking at is the 2002 Tokyo Soul under the concept branch, which, like I said, this is like Gran Turismo 3 gameplay and some tracks and modes and stuff. And so this version I'm running into a bit of a problem here. So, you see, the thing is that I cannot read Korean, so I'm kind of guessing what I'm doing in this, and I still figured it out for the most part. I'm mostly just joking, but yeah, I don't know any Korean or anything, so I'm of very little help as far as what these options actually are and everything, because I wanted to go through the options, I wanted to go through and show off all the cars, because I know people are going to think that's pretty cool, especially because like the whole point of the concept thing is these cars and driving them around and getting a feel for them and stuff. So I tested out a couple like the time trial stuff. I tried out the different cars, and then what I kind of wasn't expecting these concept discs was like okay, so you have these different tracks. You have 4 tracks and like 4 different variations of these tracks, I believe. And you got all these different cars still. You can still like save the game. You can make progress on this like giant like progress tree sort of thing. And they have like almost like license tests from the other games. And then you do these and you get like say you get like a silver ranking and then you get another car out of it. Where I was like not expecting any of that level of depth to these, so that kind of like caught me off guard. I thought this was actually really cool to play around with and try the different tracks and try the different cars and do one of the license tests, and then I unlocked a car and then I unlocked like a normal race mode, not just a time trial thing, and then like I think I got another car from doing that. It was really cool, and I wasn't expecting any of that. And like if you're into cars and these specific things, I think some of it was like some of these cars went on to be in like Gran Turismo 4. However, you could play around with them and drive them and stuff in like the Gran Turismo 3 engine, and maybe one of these tracks wasn't in Gran Turismo 4, and unfortunately that's where my knowledge isn't like super good at, but if you're like super into these games, I think this is a really cool thing to check out. And then you can see like some specific like Korean cars, and then they have some obviously I believe Japanese cars, because it's like Tokyo and Seoul, so both of those, and then there's a bunch of different cars you can choose from, and then like I said, there's a whole list of stuff that you can keep unlocking as far as cars specifically, and then you can play through the different license tests and everything, which is it's just very cool. And I because to me going in when I heard about these concept discs, I'm like, all right, you got like one track and you got like a car, and then you're driving that around and you're getting a feel for it. I didn't expect all these different modes. I didn't know I was going to be able to like save my progress and do all these different things. And so not that I was able to do this for this video, but apparently if you like 100% one of these concept discs, that it gives you a Gran Turismo 3 save file with like everything unlocked, and like, so I didn't like expect the level of interconnectivity and stuff. It's just, this was fascinating to me because I thought these were going to be like a one-off, one car, one track sort of thing, but there's like an actual serious amount of depth to here. So like again, like I feel like this is definitely something worth checking out and spending a night on, like, and trying to unlock some cars and driving around the tracks and stuff, because it's so, to me, something I really like when it comes to like specifically this is very much like a video game thing where it's like seeing early ideas in an earlier game or project that ended up being used on a later game or like a later project or whatever. So seeing some earlier cars in an earlier engine is really cool and it's really interesting. So I was checking that out for a while, and then you're going to see the footage of different tracks, and then you're going to see like the license test, and I'm like I said, I was unlocking cars and stuff. I could save the game. I was like, whoa, this is nuts. So let's talk technical makeup for a second. So this seems very similar to just how Gran Turismo 3 is. The one thing I don't remember off the top of my head is if Gran Turismo 3 had widescreen. So this does have widescreen support. It works very well. And especially when you're going through like a digital out like this, it looks superb. And then I'm using the smoothing feature for the PS2 backwards compatibility. Like this stuff looks really good. The one thing that I will say is this doesn't seem to support any sort of progressive signal, so I think it is just 4EI. Unfortunately, no matter what type of digital display you hook this up, you're going to have to deal with some form of de-interlacing. To me, I'd rather leave that up to the PS3. I feel like it does a pretty decent job with it. And for a more realistic-looking game, I do feel like the smoothing, which seems to be a pretty basic anti-aliasing effort. I don't know if it's literally just trying to like smooth out the edges. And if that's the case, then this isn't like real anti-aliasing. But for the visual makeup of this game, I think it actually looks pretty good. Most of the time, I'm a huge advocate for just like raw pixels and stuff. As far as not smoothing out an image, like if you're using an HD display, like I'm all for scan lines and line doublers and stuff like that. But as far as like smoothing things out, I've never really been a big fan. But I think whatever the PS3 is doing, I feel works really well for the visuals of the Gran Turismo games from a technical point of view. But like I said, you are stuck in 480i no matter what. But with the widescreen and the smoothing and the digital out, I think this game comes out looking really good. And I'd say it would look just as good hooked up to a CRT 4x3 with like component cables. I think that would look super good as well. So, with that, the next thing we're looking at for this video was the next thing I personally looked at, which is another branch of the Gran Turismo concept series, and this is for the Air Trek car. And again, excuse me, not a car guy. Don't know if this car is cool. I don't know if it's important. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But it's similar type of menu. You got the widescreen. I don't think this one you could save your game. And so I booted this up, and then I realized this one was a lot more limiting. But that doesn't mean it wasn't very cool to look at for this video. However, there's only so much I can show you, because you can do like 2 races, just 2 tracks, just the one car, and the other car you're racing against is also just the same car. But to me, this is still like really cool to look at, because it's focused on literally just this one car. Like, this whole disc, this whole thing was made just to show off this singular car. So, you know, I can't say if it's a cool car or not. I don't really know anything, but it's cool from the concept, pun intended, of that this whole disc, both these tracks and everything. It's literally just to showcase how this one car drives in the Gran Turismo 3 engine. So it's still, to me, this is like right up my alley as far as how, I wouldn't call this dumb, but how incredibly niche the use case of something like this is. It's like, okay, here's this car, drive on 2 tracks, get a feel for it, and that's the whole point of this disc. That's the whole point of this. I don't even think you could call it a game at this point. It literally is a technical showcase, and there is nothing that interests me more than stuff like this. So it's still really interesting. It's still really interesting. But unfortunately, there's only so much I can say about that. So I got some footage of both tracks, drove the car around. It handled well. It was fun to drive and stuff. I don't know if this was in like Gran Turismo 4 or anything, but it's cool. So I wish there was better adjectives I could use to describe my experiences with them. But like, to me, it's like, okay, here's this disc to drive one car on 2 tracks. It's like, that's cool. It's also interesting, and I can't think of a better vocabulary to describe just that this is a fun thing to check out. So I'm sorry that like I'm not using more like flowery language and stuff to describe what's going on, but it's like coming from my mentality of where I don't want to overblow anything, and I don't want to talk about how like this is the most amazing life-changing experience I've ever had. But I also like, I don't necessarily want to be boring with it, but I'm just kind of trying to take the middle ground of exactly how I felt about it. I don't want to oversell anything. I don't want to be overzealous about anything, and I don't want to like clickbait people or act like it's better than it is or whatever. And I'm not throwing like any disrespect to anybody that does, because it's probably more entertaining that way. But I want people to watch these videos and just for the absolute realness of what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to sell anybody an idea of how I am. This is literally just what I'm into and what I'm interested in. So, excuse that tangent. I just want to make sure everybody knows where I'm coming from with these kind of videos. So, we're gonna check out now. We're done with the Air Trek. We're done driving the Air Trek. We're gonna check out the next concept disc. And here's where I actually was like, oh my god, this is really cool. Because one of the first things you can see when you boot this bad boy up, this has English support, which is amazing, because I think it also has Japanese support, but I can only read like a couple words in Japanese, and I can only read hiragana. So that's not going to get me very far. And this is why I wanted to do things in the order of how I was playing them, because this wouldn't have been like quite as exciting if this was the first one I checked out, and there was no reason for the order I checked them out in, because I didn't know too much about this going in. I'm just like, I'm getting footage, I'm checking them out, I'm trying to like jot down my thoughts and stuff. So if this was the first thing I played, I think it would have made the Tokyo Soul one less exciting, less interesting, because then I would have already known most of what was going on. So this is the Tokyo Geneva one. And again, this falls under the Gran Turismo concept stuff. It's still Gran Turismo 3 kind of gameplay. But and I went through the cars and stuff. There's even more cars. There's like a lot more, it seems like, just from like the get-go. And it still has the license test, and it still has widescreen support. I could read all the options this time to see everything, which was, there was a lot in there. And then, yeah, you can still unlock things through the license test, and then you can do like the single races, and then you're unlocking more cars from that. And I was thinking, like, yeah, this is it. Like, if you're going to check one out, if you're going to check out something I'm talking about today, I think this would be super cool to like spend a night trying to unlock all the different cars and trying the different races out. And especially like if you have like a friend or something that's also into Gran Turismo stuff or into like concept disc or betas or stuff. And this isn't a beta, but somebody that shares a similar interest. I think it'd be so cool, just spend a night playing through this and trying to unlock everything, because this is like very feature filled, surprisingly. Like, so was the Tokyo Soul one, but I think because now I'm understanding everything, because I can like read it without trying to translate it or anything, that I really saw just how kind of open-ended this was and how much you could really do with this. This was such a drastic difference than the Air Trek concept is, where that you're literally going to be playing for like 10 minutes and there's like a time limit on it, just like Gran Turismo 2000. However, this you could legitimately spend like a night on and probably not finish all the content. Like, I was actually kind of surprised. This is such like a dumb thing to get giddy about, but when I this is with the Tokyo Soul one too. When I realized I could save my game, I'm like, oh my god, I can save my game in this like concept disc thing. I'm like, this is incredible. This is super cool. And then like, I did the license testing. I'm calling it a license test, but it's like not quite like that. It's still like a test. It's almost remind me of like the mission race things in Gran Turismo 6, kind of. And then I unlocked like a different car than that same test unlocked in the Tokyo Soul one. And with that kind of got me hooked a little bit. Like, I legitimately think I'm going to play this more, because it is like very interesting from a concept point of view. Again, pun intended. But also the fact that I was getting different cars, and then I could take those cars on the races and unlock more stuff and more different cars and stuff. Like, I don't know. It just, for me, coming at this thinking that these were all going to be very simple, one or two tracks and one car. Like, this was like really kind of exceeding whatever expectations I had of this, to the point where like I said, this is actually something I would just like to play more, and I'm probably going to play more, because it is still like, this one out of like all of them is like the most that's like an actual game. And no, this wouldn't be anywhere near as long as playing through a normal Gran Turismo game, but again, like, it's kind of shocking how much content really was in this. So like, I would implore you, like I said, like, please check out especially the Tokyo Geneva disc, because that has full English support, and I'm assuming most of my audience is English and stuff. So you could read everything, you could get all these different cars, and you're probably going to be racing with cars that weren't in like until like Gran Turismo 4, but in the Gran Turismo 3 it's got widescreen and everything. Like, this was such a cool time. Like, I really enjoyed the time I spent getting footage for this and like driving the cars around. Like, every car I picked and stuff, like, it felt really good. It was a very interesting experience, and I think anybody who's even like a bigger fan of Gran Turismo and like really played the heck out of 3 and 4 and could really deep dive into all these differences and stuff, they're really going to appreciate like what's going on with this disc. And I know I keep saying disc because game doesn't feel right to say. I also don't want to say like program either, even though that's like technically what this is, or the software. I just feel like disc is like the most fitting word I can use to describe these. So yeah, I really enjoyed the Tokyo Geneva disc. I thought it was really cool. So we're going to move on to the last thing we're going to be talking about tonight. And I swear, if I use the word cool one more time, I am so sorry. So this was like the first reason I wanted to start this video. And this goes back to this, like the Gran Turismo 2 the Gran Turismo 2000 concept of kind of porting forward a previous generation engine. So what we're talking about is the Gran Turismo HD concept. That's literally the title, and it couldn't be any smoother, if you ask me. So this one probably had the most widespread availability, because it was, at least for a limited time, it was on the PlayStation Network of the PS3, and then there was like limited Japanese disc of it, if I'm understanding correctly. Now, from what I was reading and stuff, this mostly is like I said, like forward porting of that's not like a real word, but you know what I'm saying, of the Gran Turismo 4 engine and porting that over to PS3 and trying to update it to actually utilize the PS3 hardware. So one of the first things we want to look at this is the fact of what resolutions it supports, because now we're getting to the point where this like actually kind of matters. So this has both a 720p mode and a 1080i mode. Like that's really impressive. So I want to say that my footage is in 1080i. I think there is some deinterlacing going on there. However, what makes this slightly confusing is the fact that in the options it has, under all the video stuff, like use your system's display settings, and it's like, that's great, my system's set to 1080p, but like, if you can't do 1080p, how are you going to do 1080p? Because it's like set to progressive, but I still had it set to like the 1080i mode, so I don't understand what it was trying to say there. I don't think this game actually has 1080p support, but it's kind of hard for me to figure out exactly, because my TV is going to deinterlace it. So even if I look at the resolution on my TV, I couldn't really tell you. And this is a very good looking game, and at this point, with how high of a resolution it is, I can't exactly tell just by my eye if it's interlaced or not, because by the time, like I said, you get to 1080i, it starts getting a little trickier to tell what's going on. And then the fact that just with all my footage and everything, and the capture card, like I'm running it through an M Classic upscaler, and the capture card is happening. None of these are supporting interlaced formats. Everything's getting de-interlaced. So I can't quite tell you if this is just 1080i or somehow 1080p, but I don't think it is 1080p, because the way it was phrased makes it seem like it's 1080i or 720p. But, coming off of the PS2 games, and I know Gran Turismo 4 had 1080i support, but this is a lot more of a cleaner implementation. Not that wasn't super impressive, but it also had like a limited color depth and stuff doing that. Again, this looks really good, and then again, though, it has that look of like this is like an HD PS2 game, and like if we were again to bring over how we were developing PS2 games into the PS3 generation, and I cannot explain again how much I love this look inside development. It is so fascinating to me, and I love to see the way we were progressing technologically speaking. It is so fun it's to dive into this kind of stuff. And then again, this also just like this plays good. I find the concept of unlocking the cars and then trying to beat the next time, and unlocking the cars and trying to beat the next time. It's a good flow to this, and it's like this doesn't have as much content as say like the Tokyo Seoul or the Tokyo Geneva concept disc on the PS2, but this has enough, again, where you can spend a couple hours on this and unlock the cars, try to beat your times. So it's one track again, but this does have quite a few cars you can unlock. At least 10, I believe, looking at the menu. And then there's also like these drift trial things, but I didn't unlock that in time for this video. But yeah, so there's a couple modes you got there. You got the one track, but then the most important thing for a racing game is the fact that you got a bunch of different cars you can try out. So This was like probably the most fun one for me to play, because I think at this point they were really getting their handling down. They were really just getting how good the game feels to play down, but it still has that like beta kind of feel to it. Not in the sense that it's unpolished, but like this is not how PS3 games were. This is definitely taking like PS2 engine type stuff, like the Gran Turismo 4 engine, and trying to mold it to be functional on a PS3 and take the extra hardware to render it in HD and maybe render the cars better. And the cars probably are way higher detailed than Gran Turismo 4 and stuff. So this goes back to the Gran Turismo 2000 concept, and I think for me personally, the coolest ones to look into tonight were Gran Turismo 2000 and then Gran Turismo HD concept. The HD concept was like the whole reason I wanted to make this video. I had a lot of fun checking out everything and seeing what the game had to offer from a pure technical point of view this early on into like the PS2's life cycle. And again, with how Polyphony kind of tested the waters of consoles, I think it's a really cool jumping in point to seeing and kind of like peeking behind the curtain of the development of games and stuff. And that was the whole reason why I wanted to make this video. That way, people that may not have super easy access to this stuff, or maybe haven't even heard of this kind of stuff before, could check out what I think was a couple of the most unique and interesting weird Gran Turismo oddities, and it's also a very good look at development during the PS2 and the PS3. And the concept disc, I feel, are more so interesting from a pure game development point of view, not necessarily a hardware at that point, but to kind of see earlier ideas in an earlier build of a game, at this point being Gran Turismo 3, and seeing how those ideas were handled with their current technology and their current engine. So that's kind of the reason I picked what I did today and picked out the specific titles. So, as I said earlier in the video, I was going to look at something else for this video. I was going to look at Gran Turismo 5 Prologue and then see how that kind of changed from both the HD concept, but also from the retail release of Gran Turismo 5. Gran Turismo 5 Prologue was a retail release, but I mean like the full finished game of Gran Turismo 5. But at that point, I kind of started to realize that that's not quite what this video was going for. This was way more of a underground look, so to speak, of development stuff. And Gran Turismo 5 Prologue is just full retail, and so is Gran Turismo 5. And if I'm including that stuff in here, then it's kind of defeating the point of the video. However, with that being said, this kind of stuff is incredibly interesting to me, and that certainly doesn't mean that I'm not going to look at it later. In fact, I probably will. So, here's where I'm going to plug myself. This is the end of the video. Well, like the video, subscribe, comment on the video. This channel's starting to get a little bit of traction, which is kind of surprising, honestly. And for anybody that's subscribing, anybody that's liking the videos, anybody that's watching the videos, seriously, I'm incredibly grateful. Because to me, this is such a specific niche topic, and so are my other videos. So the fact that I'm actually having people watch the videos is incredible, because that means, there's other people out there that are into the same kind of stuff that I am. It means a lot to me. It's really cool. So, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, because obviously I'm going to talk about more technical stuff later on the line. And it's not all going to be just Gran Turismo or just this thing or just this thing, because you could probably notice at this point that I cover a broad range of topics, and that's not me just trying to cast a net of a bunch of different things and try to get in a bunch of different groups and fandoms and stuff like that. It's just there is so many different things that I'm interested in. You are bound to come across a video of mine that has something that you're super into. So, if you want to stick around for what I'm doing, I'd be super appreciative and super grateful. These videos have been a ton of fun to make, and it gives me a reason to really dive into some stuff that I probably wouldn't just for my own sake anymore. But it really gives me a driving reason to look at this stuff and learn new things and get all this footage and do all this editing and stuff. And it's a really cool and really fun driving force for these kind of ideas. So I'm gonna end the video with that. Thank you for watching, and I will see